I'm Anna Webb. Welcome to A Dog's Life. Hey, Mr. Binks, you know it's been in the news a lot over many years that beagles are unnecessarily tortured in the name of science in private laboratories. That's why we're jumping on Zoom now to speak to Phil Green to find out why signing a petition is so important. Philip Green, I'm so delighted you've joined me on A Dog's Life.
Thank you. I'm good. I'm very pleased to be here.
Well, Philip, you're here because just over a year ago, I did a podcast with Camp Beagle, with John of Camp Beagle, at the stage when the petition to stop unnecessary and very cruel vivisection taking place on beagles in an establishment in Cambridge had just been launched. And I'm delighted we're chatting because you're the proud owner of Scarlett the Beagle, who is one of the few beagles to have escaped the torture.
That's right. So the site in Cambridge where the main Camp Beagle protest is a place called MBR Acres in Whitton, Cambridgeshire, near Huntingdon. MBR stands for Marshall Bioresources. So the MBR Acres site breeds about 2,000 beagles every year. They're bred purely for toxicology testing in the pharmaceutical and other companies. Scarlett herself is an MBR beagle. She wasn't bred at that site. She was bred at their gigantic New York site, which breeds probably around 20,000 beagles a year. It's huge numbers of beagles, and they all live short, painful lives in toxicology labs, being tested on in the most cruel way possible. We can talk about that. And scientifically, it's unnecessary. Scientifically, it's very flawed. There's so much better ways of doing it for better results. Animal testing subverts human health and safety for so many reasons. But anyway, Scarlett spent the first 2 years of her life in a toxicology laboratory in Hungary. Then towards the end of 2016, the Beagle Freedom Project rescued her along with 6 other beagles from that facility and brought them to the UK. So we've had Scarlett for about 6.5 years. And of course, we're very much animal advocates ourselves. So Scarlett has been the face of a number of campaigns we've supported over the last 5 to 6 years.
Yes, I know. I've seen you on Twitter quite a lot, and I applaud you. So, how did you actually get Scarlett? Were you involved with the Freedom for Beagles project already, or how did it happen?
Well, Janie, my wife, she was signed up as a potential adopter for an ex-laboratory rescue beagle. She was signed up with the Beagle Freedom Project. We keep a close eye on them, the BFP, Beagle Freedom Project. And then we learned towards the end of 2016, there'd been a rescue of beagles from Hungary that had come to the UK. So Beagle Freedom Project, it's an animal charity based out of Hollywood in the US. Shannon Keith is the president and founder. Awesome lady. She's an animal rights lawyer herself. Goes back a long way as an animal rights person. She negotiates with the laboratories, uses freedom of information requests and challenges them, and tries to get beagles released from the labs. She says, look, if you've done the test, you can't use the beagles for anything more. Hand them over to us. We will find a home for them. No questions asked. They negotiated over some time to get these beagles released from Hungary, and thank goodness that she succeeded. Otherwise, Scarlett wouldn't be alive today. She would be long gone. And Scarlett and her 6 siblings came to the UK in December 2016, and we adopted her a few weeks later. And it's very much a blind adoption because you don't know what the Beagles went through in the lab, what specific experiments were done for what purpose. All you can do is make an educated guess based on their behaviors as to what happened to them. And sometimes over the years, you find little medical problems, ailments. So, for example, in the last couple of years, we discovered that Scarlett has some scar tissue on her esophagus where the various pipes, the windpipe and the esophagus meet. And that scar tissue would have been caused by a tube being rammed down her throat, which is a procedure called gavage, where at a testing lab, they take a tube, they very clumsily ram it down the throat of a beagle into the stomach, and then they inject them with a substance, which could be anything from a pharmaceutical, cleaning product, whatever. They inject it, no pain relief, no palliative care. It's put into their stomach, and they're just left there to suffer, often very painfully, in silence, cold, alone, in a cold metabolic cage. And that happens every day for 90 days, this procedure. It's absolutely horrible. Some beagles won't survive the procedure at all. They'll die halfway through. Even if they survive the 90 days, there's a good chance that they will be euthanized and a post-mortem to see exactly what had happened, the damage to their internal organs. Liver damage is usually the first place to look at, but it's pretty horrible. But we know from the scar tissue in her esophagus, her trachea, that she was subject to a gavage type treatment where a tube was rammed down her throat once a day, maybe twice a day for 90 days at a time. And that may have happened 2 or 3 times during her 2 years in the laboratory.
Oh gosh, I mean it's shocking, isn't it? I mean, beyond shocking. For me, it's like a no-brainer. If you swallow some bleach, for example, you know it's not going to do you much good, but that's what I've found difficult to understand with this laboratory, and I'm sure there's many others where it's privately funded pharmaceutical research. So none of this research really needs to happen. It's not like it's research to perhaps save millions of human beings or something. It's totally to sell product.
Well, absolutely. Several aspects here. Number one, there's a lot of public money, millions upon millions. We don't know how much money is spent on these cruel and unnecessary animal tests, because when you look at the figures quoted by the various agencies in the UK, such as the NC3Rs and statistics the Home Office publishes every year, it's not really clear how much money is spent or the real true extent of how many animals are tested on, how many times, for what purpose. And very often it's the case that these companies do these tests so that they can put a legal tick in the box and stop them getting lawsuits, or to say, well, we've met the regulatory requirements. But unfortunately, these tests, they're often conducted with, should we say, questionable scientific rigor. And you'll see a lot of undercover footage and whistleblower information related to that. Plus, they're completely unreliable. You're right. If you swallow bleach, something bad is going to happen to you. So
yeah.
Why the heck, if you swallow anything or put excessive amounts of shampoo in your eyes, things you shouldn't really do, something not good is going to happen. But worse than that is that when you look at the success or failure rates of what happens when you test on an animal and then take that product to a human, you get 90% plus failure rate. So something that has somehow passed a test on an animal, like a drug, is then given to humans to try, clinical trials, and then after clinical trials, it'll eventually get, if it passes clinical trials, it'll eventually get some form of approval from a regulatory authority to say, yes, you can now market that drug or whatever. But there's a 92% plus failure rate. So 92% of substances that have tested successfully on animals fail to work in humans. So as well as costing goodness knows how much money, subjecting animals to the most horrific cruelty and suffering, it doesn't even work.
Yes.
And the thing is, the law is written on the assumption that it does work, but we've now got some scientific data spanning many decades that demonstrate that animal models do not work. They cannot predict the behavior in humans. And we have technology now that can do the job far, far better, that can predict the outcome.
I mean, Phil, that's where I think, yes, you know, we're in an age now of artificial intelligence. I mean, let's not go there, you know, now. But, you know, technology is definitely at a stage where this is unnecessary. It's clear. And clearly, a beagle is not the same as a human. I mean, we know that because also with digestive reactions, it's useless to do it on a dog because a dog's digestive system is the biggest difference between dogs and humans. There is no comparison between a dog's digestion and a human's digestion. One's acidic, that's the dog's. One's alkaline, that's ours. One's short, that's the dog's. One's long, that's ours. One produces the sugar enzyme to break things down, which could or could not have a positive or not effect to a particular pharmaceutical. Dogs don't excrete that enzyme. So there's nothing comparable about the digestive system. So, you know, that alone proves that those awful lavage pipes on little Scarlett were absolutely, you know, pointless.
And, you know, this is something that's been known for well over 100 years, if not much, much longer. You could go back to the discovery of penicillin. Fleming, he tested it on rabbits. But as you say, the digestive systems are very different. Rabbits assimilated it too fast for it to do anything. So penicillin in its first infancy was shelved for 10 years until somebody else came along and thought, wait a minute, let's try and find another modality of tested. And then they managed to, they discovered that actually it can work and did work very, very successfully on humans. And this is going back to the 1920s. And we not learned anything?
Well, no, and there's the statue, you know, in Battersea, isn't there, called the Little Brown Dog. I mean, to think of, I mean, back in the Victorian age, though, I suppose, you know, they were busy trying to work out the world, weren't they? You know, discoveries, there was Darwin, the whole works was going on. We didn't know very much before that, really, did we? But people were beginning to explore the world, and science was beginning to become a thing. Before that, of course, people use homeopathy, but you know, there want to be this quest for science, and you know, what I hate is that anesthetic wasn't invented till about 1930s. I don't think they used chlorophyll, didn't they?
Yeah.
But the animals in these early experiments to work out the physiology and anatomy of humans as well as dogs, I do believe humans were cut up quite a bit to work out, you know, where bits were and all the rest of it from a science perspective.
That's right. And humans were experimented on. And then the Nuremberg Code came along after the Second World War. And there was the Nuremberg Code that basically said, look, we must never do this again. Test on humans first. And that's where the whole concept of, well, let's test on an animal was really formalized across the world. And then moving on, in 1964, there was a treaty that came out of a scientific group in Helsinki that said that reinforced the principle: test on an animal first. They did say if appropriate, which is a caveat that is often ignored. And this is the sad thing: we've almost, like, humans have chosen to believe, and politicians have chosen to believe, that somehow testing on an animal gives you some level of comfort. If you go back to, say, the terrible thalidomide tragedy, the outcome of that was for people to say, we need more animal testing. But actually, no, because the issue with thalidomide, it was a drug given to pregnant women, I think for morning sickness, but it was given to them on the assumption that the fetus developing in the womb was completely impervious to things going on in the woman's body by way of the umbilical cord offering protection. That was a scientific assumption that's since been proven false. So it is possible for certain things to get through the umbilical cord into the fetus, and this particular drug cause birth defects. And even today, no amount of animal modeling can predict birth defects. And after thalidomide, scientists went back to see if they could have actually predicted that terrible tragedy. And they would give animals, tens, hundreds of times the dose that you would ever give a human. And try as they might, they simply could not. Even after the fact, knowing that birth defects can arise, they simply could not reproduce in animal models and predict something like birth defects. So the animal model just doesn't work. We've got to look at new technology. We've got things called organ on a chips that some companies have been developing very successfully, where you have a small cultivation of human cells, and you can cultivate liver cells, kidneys, brain cells, and it is literally on a chip that's wired up to electronics. And some very pioneering companies are doing these things. And because it's human-centered science, instead of getting this horrendous failure rate, you get these fantastic success rates. Yes. And that's got to be the way to go. Let's start, we've cured cancer in mice so many thousands of times. Organ on a chip and other technologies will have the capability for finding real cures faster and cheaper.
Yes, this is it. We need to adapt. It's really barbaric what's going on, morally, really, and financially bankrupt, I would say.
Yes, it is. We don't know how much. It's a lot of money frittered away, wasted on animal testing. It's not just the financial issue; it's the ethical issue, this horrendous cruelty and suffering being done to animals, and then on top of that is the fact that human health and safety is being subverted. We do get successful drugs to market, not because of animal testing, but in spite of animal testing. You throw dice, and you are occasionally going to get a 6 come up. You throw 4 dice, you are very, very occasionally going to get 4 6s come up. That's just coincidence that, as it happened on that one occasion, there was some correlation, but like I say, it's in spite of animal testing, not because of animal testing. So we really do need to chase after the big wins that are out there and start finding real cures.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm not a mad fan of pharmaceuticals, I'll be quite honest with you. I often treat my own animals with homeopathy, and which has been a lot around centuries longer than conventional medicine. So I'm very much on that page, being a naturopath, a fully qualified naturopath, and canine nutrition and behavior expert, basically.
And by the way, we follow that with Scarlett, because we don't know what Scarlett had pumped into her in the toxicology lab. So we take the view that treatment she has must be as natural as possible, and we actually utilize a very specialist vet in Hertfordshire that decades and decades of experience.
I know who he is.
Yes,
is that Richard Allport?
That's him. Yeah. So we
he's been my vet. He's been my vet for donkey's years, actually. Yeah. And I now use Barbara Jones, actually, in Shropshire, because I spent a year in Shropshire helping my mum, and Barbara is actually totally integrative. So if you do need a blood test, because I would imagine Scarlett needs annual blood tests, really, blood works, just to see how all her organs are doing.
Well, when she first came out of the lab, we thought we do need to understand what condition her organs are in. So we did take her to the vet once to get some blood works done. And thankfully, the results came back that her major organs were all functioning intact, no obvious long-term damage. But I tell you one thing, she reacted, very, very strongly when the vet tried to take blood. I know all animals have a tendency to do that, but Scarlett especially, it was almost as if she was saying, I'm out of the lab. I'm not doing this for you. So she fought it very, very hard. But yeah, thankfully the results came back good. We only take her to the vet, a traditional vet, when we absolutely need to. So for example, recently we realized that some of her teeth were not in the best condition. And that's another common pattern with ex-laboratory beagles, because they're not in a natural environment. They don't get to eat and chew normal things and have chew on sticks and varied diet. Their teeth are often in not the best conditions when they come out of the lab. Scarlett was no exception. So we do keep a close eye on her dental hygiene. And unfortunately, if she does need to have a tooth out, she had a couple out a few weeks ago, sadly. She did have to go under the anesthetic. It just had to be done, unfortunately. But we avoid any form of pharmaceuticals as much as we possibly can.
No, brilliant. And you can, I feel that at last, I mean, I know a number of traditionally trained vet nurses, for example, are all doing courses like the course I did, but I did mine back in 2012, because there is so much more out there that can be optimized for dogs that do have sensitivities. For example, actually, I've recently tracked down the herb actually that insulin is made from. Won't go into massive detail, but yes, that brought in this animal's case the blood sugars right down where, interestingly, insulin failed to touch it. So
that is very interesting. Actually.
I know, because of course, yes, insulin can actually give you diabetes. There's this massive irony, and it's also ridiculously expensive and extremely toxic. It's with my cat, actually. It's really quite sad, who passed, and it appears that he actually got close to a pesticide that is known to, or is called oxyphosphorus, which can in some cases create hypoglycemic effects as part of its poisoning. And unless diagnosed as that rather than diabetes, if you treat for diabetes, it's just a fast road to death, which unfortunately it was. So yeah, interesting, very, very interesting for me that, but we didn't have time, sadly, to save Gremlin. So no, gutted, beyond gutted, but it's got to do with a huge fox population now in London beyond belief. And, the council won't help you rid your garden of a fox den. Not that I've got one in my garden, but I've got one next door. And so, you have to pay for experts to come out. And of course, the message is, for experts, don't use toxic substances. Of course, we do everything humanely, but that's expensive. And currently, people don't have that extra budget. So opt for, cheap and horrid. So, very sad, very, very terribly sad. But, and I think Scarlett's done so well to rally. I mean, hopefully, she got out of there in time, because dogs start to age at the age of 2. So she kind of was lucky to get into the right hands at a time when I think, it could have gone either way. And you've obviously, I know Richard very well, as I said, so it's brilliant. So it is interesting, isn't it, to see how you can fix things without pharmaceuticals, don't you think, Phil?
Absolutely. And it's like you say, these homeopathic cures, many of them have been around far, far longer than pharmaceutical cures.
And herbs,
and many do work, and Scarlett's homeopathic treatment does work. We know for a fact it does work, and we tweak it and adjust it, and we see how she gets on with it. We got into a good routine with it, but it does work.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant, really brilliant. How funny. I didn't know we'd be talking about that in the podcast, but I love it. I love it. So, yeah, so Scarlett, I mean, what would you say to somebody, wanting to adopt a beagle like Scarlett?
It's like adopting any rescue animal. You've got to be patient. I think there's the rule of three. It takes the first 3 days you have a dog for them to just have an initial decompression. It takes a week. It takes 3 weeks for them to start to learn your routine, and then 3 months for them to really feel part of your home. You just have to be patient, and with any dog, learn about the breed. Beagles can make wonderful. They are wonderful, loving, gentle
They're
souls.
brilliant dogs. I've got
They are.
friends in Kensal Rise that
Yeah.
I knew their two beagles. My word, the stories were just brilliant. They were so mad that you simply couldn't make them up. Charlie was a working strain beagle, so he would have been a pack of beagles going out on a hunt, because of course they are olfactory dogs. They're scent hounds rather than, as a greyhound being a sight hound. And yes, choosing the right dog for your lifestyle, they're extremely difficult to train in my experience, and they're just natural get up to mischief monkeys.
Yes. Interestingly, with Scarlett, even though she was never fully nurtured and raised by her natural mum, she never lived a normal dog's life for the first 2 years of her life. So in some ways, she's had to teach herself how to be a dog, like you would in the same way as any other pet dog would be. She has a ferocious hunting instinct. Some beagles, they're a bit sort of meh with their hunting instinct. They're not really concerned. Scarlett, her nose is as keen as it gets. She is a real true scent hound. And we try to off lead when we initially got her, but of course, we live near a natural forest full of deer, lots of forest foxes, and she would just chase them if she got a sight or smell of them. She's, we came to the conclusion that we couldn't allow her complete freedom in the forest. It's just too tempting in the forest. So we keep her on a very, very long 30-foot trailing lead. It gives her some freedom. It's only at places like the beach where there's no foxes or deer around that we can truly let her off lead. But yes, the beagles can make wonderful, wonderful family pets. And to get an ex-laboratory beagle, we can honestly say is an honor and a privilege to be able to adopt one, because the love you get from them when you start helping them and you teach them how to be a dog, and you find you get so much back from them. They're just wonderful.
Oh no, I can believe it. Absolutely can believe it, to be honest. And yes, but it's a very important point you made, to choose the right breed for you, the time you have, the lifestyle, the experience of dogs. You've obviously had dogs before, I can tell. So you've been able to help Scarlett really proactively, and your location with the forest, I mean, sounds really, really wonderful for her. So, but not everyone can offer that. And I think when you're taking on any dog into your life, you really have to be honest, don't you?
You do. And dogs, you've got, as Ricky Gervais said, you've got 15 years of joy, give or take, when you have a dog. And there's responsibilities. The phrase is, it's not just for Christmas, it's for life. You do have to walk a dog. You should walk a dog at least twice a day, maybe 3 times a day. Scarlett at times will have 3 walks, a very early morning walk just to get her ablutions going. Then she'll have a midday walk, and then maybe a late evening walk just to settle her for the night. I'm not saying that's what you should do for every dog. Every dog is different. Every family has their own specific routine, but you do have to consider the dog's needs. The walk is for them. The walk is about the dog. It's not about you. So do it for the dog.
Oh, Phil, I agree. I mean, I think far too many people are using dog walkers and doggy daycare and everything. Occasionally, everybody might need that, but it's occasionally, it's not every day. So it's something I'm really big on. I know Mike, my producer, listening in right now, will be giggling. His shoulders will be going up and down. I think no, you're so right. But there is this petition, isn't there, that has to be signed, right? It has to get enough signatures. It's doing very well, but we need to push it out, right, Phil?
Yes. So there's been a few petitions over the last couple of years, and by getting the number of signatures on the petition to over 100,000 means that it is very likely going to be debated in Parliament.
Yeah.
And every time these things come up for debate in Parliament, it reminds the government, it reminds the Home Office, which is the government body that oversees the testing of animals in laboratories, because it comes under the Home Office, not DEFRA for some reason. It's a reminder to them that, look, the British public do care about animal welfare. We do want to see change. We know that testing on animals is not just ethically wrong, it's scientifically flawed, does not work, and we must invest much more in non-animal methods. So getting these petitions debated in Parliament, getting those signatures over 100,000 so we can get these debated in Parliament is so important to keep the pressure up on not just the government, actually, all parties. For them to be reminded that, look, this is what the British public are telling you, and the message is not going to go away.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's like we have a duty of care. And also, I mean, I would say, can't you sue these people under the Animal Welfare Act, or am I being a bit naive?
Well, this is the thing. Laboratory animals are not protected by the same welfare laws that govern any other animal. So Scarlett as a beagle can sit outside Camp Beagle as one of the most protected species in this country. The moment she enters those gates of NBR Acres, or the moment she enters the gates of a testing laboratory, that protection is gone. And quite honestly, there is no such thing as an illegal experiment, really.
Why not?
Because it's deemed, the Home Office deems animal testing as a necessary evil. Well, it's just evil, it's not necessary. So they will sign off tests on animals. Every test that's done on an animal must be signed off by the Home Office, and they're given a license to do animal tests. So the Home Office, the part of the Home Office that governs this, is the Animals and Science Regulatory Unit, and they sign off these licenses. And the law as written says that, look, you don't test on an animal if there is a non-animal method available. But the ASRU are still signing off animal tests when there is an approved non-animal method on file, because they're actually breaking the law. The ASRU are breaking the law as written by signing off these project licenses. They're just rubber stamping them. They're not doing enough due diligence to critique them and verify and check that there are non-animal methods available. We don't know the exact figure, but there are sources that claim that if the ASRU, if the government was properly following the laws written, we could wipe out around about 90% thereabouts of the tests that we do on animals in the UK, because there's non-animal methods available. So that's just disgraceful. That's just
it's mind blowing. It's horrendous.
It's bad enough that the law presumes that animal testing works, that it doesn't, but to actually completely disregard that part of the law that says if there's if I don't like the word alternative, but if there's and I'll explain why in a minute. If there's an alternative to an animal test, you must use that, not the animal test. They're ignoring that. By the way, the reason I don't like the word alternative, saying, there is an alternative to an animal test, that assumes the animal test works, which it doesn't. So alternative is not the best word. I know that's splitting hairs, being pedantic. But even by following the laws written, if it were done properly, if the Home Office and the ASOU were actually doing the job they're paid to do, we could eliminate a lot of tests that are done on animals. So all these petitions are centered around, look, let's give the animals the protection so they're not subject to unnecessary cruelty. Let's invest in non-animal methods. Let's hold these institutions and the government accountable.
Yes, yes. And do we really need a million different headache pills?
Well, exactly. There is a saying about the pharmaceutical industry that a patient cured is a customer lost. And unfortunately, that's what it comes down to, in that you're being sold a treatment. And unfortunately, a lot of people, they'll say, go to a doctor expecting a pill as the fix.
Yeah, no, we're conditioned, aren't we, to take pills?
We are conditioned. So, and we're conditioned to believe that it's like an on-off switch. You take the pill, it works. You stop taking the pill, it doesn't work. It's really not that simple, because there are cases where you can give exactly the same treatment to identical twins. So two people that are genetically 100% the same, and they will react differently to the same treatment. So the old model of the basis of a one-size-fits-all even is something we need to move away from. There's better options available.
Yes. And I think as well, hopefully, I mean, can the pressure from the planet influence this a bit, Phil, as well? In that, all pharmaceuticals are produced with heat, great heat. So they're burning electricity and emitting gunk into the air, in their processing technique. If you eliminated that, it's never really discussed this, but, for lots of obvious reasons, I think. But I think I've asked a few people, how much do you think the pharmaceutical industry alone contributes to global warming? No one actually knows the answer, funnily enough, but I'm guessing quite a lot, actually. So, there's that aspect.
Well, if you look at, say, the use of beagles in a testing laboratory, you've got the breeding of the beagle. When you look at where they're bred, you've got metabolic cages, all of the equipment, the lab equipment, even what animals are fed in laboratories is a very almost clinical process. They're obviously fed something that's as cheap as possible, that keeps them barely alive, but no more. They're certainly not in a nurturing environment where they're either fed or given the opportunity to grow any significant muscle mass. But this whole industry, the whole ecosystem around animal testing is huge, and you've got any number of industries coming together that make that. And what that footprint looks like ecologically is anyone's guess. It is probably huge. Whereas, let's move away from non-animal methods. Let's look at human-centric methods. Stop wasting vast amounts of money and resources and planetary resources on something that just does not work and is inefficient. So common sense would tell you, if you move to a modern method, you are very likely to get a much better environmental footprint. You're actually producing something, delivering a methodology that works.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just out of interest, what are the figures? You see, my guess would be that it's America and the UK that does the most vivisection. Am I right or am I wrong?
America is probably the number one, because whereas if you look at the UK statistics, the figures published by the Home Office, which are the figures they choose to publish, and by the way, British law, there's something called the Animals in Scientific Procedures Act, the ASPA 1986. Section 24 has this is a secrecy clause, which basically literally shrouds the vivisection industry in this country in a veil of secrecy. So any freedom of information request you get, you submit, it's likely to come back very heavily redacted. It's unheard of. When the ruling party that we have, before they came to power, they actually put, I think, in their manifesto a commitment to abolishing that secrecy clause. They never have. Even if they abolished the clause and we started to get real transparency and we didn't get redacted information from the Home Office, we might actually start to get an idea of how the scale of this, how much money and the scale of the unnecessary cost and suffering. But going back to the UK, there's roughly 2,500 animals, dogs especially, there's many more animals incarcerated, but I think this country uses about 2,500 dogs per year in science. You go to the US has probably over 70,000 beagles.
Wow.
Incarcerated in the
yeah.
So they are probably the biggest, but it happens right across the world, many countries in the world. If you look at the rescues Beagle Freedom Project have done in the last decade, they've been getting rescues from as far afield as South Korea, for example.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me.
Scarlett was rescued from Hungary. So this does happen pretty much in most, maybe all developed countries.
Yes. Oh gosh, we're using a lot of time here, and I want to get the main message across that people have got to sign this petition, really.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Phil, what is the petition? Where can people sign it? We're obviously going to have the link big in the show notes, so everyone listening now, go to the show notes and please sign this. So, but you've got websites. I know Scarlett's very prominent on Twitter, I think, isn't she, Phil?
Scarlett's got social media. She's on Facebook. She's on Instagram. She's on Twitter. We're going to look to getting her live on TikTok as well.
Wow.
But yes. So Scarlett's got her own social media that reflects not just her life as a beautiful beagle, but her campaigning. Camp Beagle have a large presence on social media. So the main Camp Beagle Facebook page, they have a website, thecampbeagle.com. Social media and the website will give you more information on the petition and links to it where you can look at the petition and sign it. And the current petition is really focused on regulatory toxicity. There's this notion that's it's not actually law, it's generally accepted practice to test any new drug on two species, a canine and a non-canine, typically a rodent. And the sad thing is that the canine test only contributes at the very, very most to as little as 2% in terms of probability of safety, which is absolutely negligible. So the petition focuses very much on the regulatory toxicity, the two species, and the need for change. And my view is that, look, even if you don't 100% agree with maybe the wording of the petition, or there's some aspect of it you may have a slightly different opinion on, the main thing is sign these petitions, because it gets the debate in Parliament. It raises awareness. It puts the MPs and the Home Office under pressure to debate these things. It gets it in the public eye. So please do sign these petitions.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm sure our listeners will be signing the petition. I've signed the petition. That's done. And yeah, let's hope for change. It's a very murky business, that's for sure, and it needs to be, exposed a bit more and changed. But Phil, change is coming. It can only come. That's the thing,
The US the FDA Modernization Act, which was signed into law in the US in December, from the US perspective, strikes off the mandatory testing of new drugs on animals.
Well, that's brilliant.
The US is leading the way.
Good.
Rishi Sunak and the government said they want to be leaders in technology. Well, it starts here.
Yes. Well, let's not go into politics right now. I think we'll be here for all day, Phil, you know, because we think on the same page. So look, I do hope Scarlett gets better from her cruciate injuries, and I would love to stay in touch and have an update on that alone, and talk more about herbs and homeopathy, Phil, maybe too.
Absolutely. Everything we do around Scarlett and her life and her care, we obviously look for the best solution for her, and we do look always for the most natural solutions as much as we possibly can. And in a way, Scarlett is a campaigner. We're very passionate about campaigning for change, and change is coming. You can't stop technology.
It's the forward-thinking brands that genuinely, hand on heart, say no testing on animals, whether it's makeup or whatever. And that's more now, because people will buy into that brand because that's what people actually want. On the whole, I think, you know, people don't want cruelty to animals going on. Well, Phil, let's chat again and take this further. Really enjoyed our conversation. And here's to Scarlett, the trooper, the lucky, the lucky one.
We're lucky. We are so privileged to have had the opportunity to be her parents.
Oh, thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Well, that's our show, Mr. Binks. What did you think? Yes, it does put perspective on life. And it does show how lucky you've been compared to Scarlett. And you're right. It is time for Woof of the Week. It really is time to end unnecessary and torturous testing on animals. Please sign the petition in this week's show notes. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, go on, give us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really does help. Thanks again, of course, to Phil Green for joining us today, and all the links, especially to the petition, are in the show notes. Thanks, of course, to Mike Hansen, my producer, for all the production and music as ever. What's that, Mr. Binks? Yes, you're right. We will be back in your feed next Sunday. So make it easy. Subscribe. It's free. Then that way you'll never miss another show. Bye for now.